The Rake is a creepypasta, which, if you don't know, is just an internet story. None of them are real, they're just written that way. The Rake seemed to get really popular in the mid 2000s. In the original story, there isn't much to go off of. The only description was that there was some creepy creature that kind of looked like a naked man or a large hairless dog. So it leaves a lot to the imagination. Soon, pictures like this one started popping up around the internet, and the legend took off. So much so that they made their own movie in 2018. It opens up with a nice, happy family. The father of this family is a psychologist that takes his work home with him. He's doing notes for a particularly disturbed patient named Jacob, while his family decorates for Christmas downstairs. Jacob believes that he must appease an entity by bringing harm to others and even himself, and he calls this entity the Rake. Why? I don't know, maybe he was cleaning up leaves one day and he thought, hey, that'd be a good name for this guy possessing me to kill people.
Jacob believes he must appease this entity by bringing harm to himself and infecting those around him.
So anyway, Mom tucks the kids into bed and comes downstairs to see the front window wide open. In the winter. Sure, no red flags there. She's cleaning up and suddenly Jacob attacks her. But she doesn't give in without a fight. She kicks him in the nuts and runs upstairs to get her husband's help. But he's listening to past recordings with headphones on, so he can't hear her. But that doesn't really make any sense. I mean, if it was music, that's one thing, but just people talking, you would certainly hear your wife screaming for help. Anyway, she hides the kids and whaps Jacob over the head with a bat. But this guy is unstoppable, and as she tries to get into her husband's office, she's killed. A little while later, her husband takes his headphones off and leaves, only to find his dead wife. The brother and sister, whose names are Ben and Ashley, decide it's time to come out of hiding, only to find that both of their parents are now dead. And the murderer is standing right there, with his eyes gouged out. He says it will infect us all, then slits his own throat, which, I must admit, the effects here are pretty gruesome. Fast forward a few years, and now the kids are adults. It gets a bit confusing here as to who's who, but just know that these people are not the kids from the beginning. This is Andrew and Nicole. After the traumatic events that we just saw, Nicole's family adopted Ben and Ashley. So she calls her sister, and she is, but she didn't have her parents murdered by a psychopath. So they don't have the same bond. Nicole is struggling with something though, and we find out later that she had a miscarriage. So her husband Andrew is very protective of his wife's feelings. This is all stuff that really isn't that important and has nothing to do with the Rake, but hey, now you know. Andrew and Nicole moved away for a while, but now are coming back to town, and the family are getting together to have a welcome home party.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Ashley is the first to arrive, and she doesn't look so good. She understandably still has quite a bit of issues that pills and therapy just aren't solving. Nonetheless, she says she's improving and living life day by day. After catching up a little bit, they all settle in for the night. Ashley wakes up and hears something downstairs, only to find some weird-looking fetus? Definitely not the Rake. She screams and her adopted sister comes running, but nothing's there. She's losing it again and might not be as stable as she claimed to be. Next, we meet Ben and his wife Michelle, who swing by for the party, along with Jeremy, who seems to be a close friend of Andrew's. They're all talking and they offer Nicole a drink. which she refuses,
Oh,
and they instantly know why.
I shouldn't.
She's pregnant again, which is great news, but Ashley doesn't really react. If anything, she seems pretty upset. This triggers Andrew, and he's had enough of Ashley's attitude. He knows how important this is to his wife, who already lost a child.
Just let it go.
He says Ashley needs to drop her own problems and celebrate with them.
I'm interested.
And that's when we learn that Ashley was once pregnant.
18 months ago.
But due to her mental condition, the doctors convinced her to get rid of the baby. But also, the voice inside her head, the Rake, was telling her to do the same thing. She says that once she did it, the voice went away, but now it's back, excited over the idea of Nicole's unborn child. So, what's going on here? Is there this mysterious entity that only affects Ashley, or is this just a mental condition? Right now, I'm leaning towards the latter, but that might change soon. Ben goes downstairs to look at a box full of his dad's old tapes. Suddenly, a huge hand comes out of the box and knocks Ben out. Michelle and Nicole come running down and drive him to the hospital. He comes to and admits that the nightmares that Ashley has been having have been happening to him as well, and she might not be as crazy as she looks. They turn around to head back, but they're a ways away, and back home, it's starting to hit the fan. Ashley is out in the middle of the woods, led there by herself, but naked. When this doppelganger turns around, we see that, well, it's not Ashley, but some deformed creature. Back at the house, they have their own problems to worry about. Jeremy heads out for a smoke and to look for his girlfriend, who was supposed to come over for the party. After looking for a while, well, he finds her, dead in the barn. And it's not looking good for him, because he too is killed. Then back inside, where Andrew hears something in the basement. He goes to take a look, and all of his wine bottles are busted. Blaming Ashley, he's pretty ticked. But maybe it was something else. Maybe it was the Rake. Here we get to see a little more of the anatomy of this creature. One of its hands is just a single long claw. The other hand has razor-sharp nails. This is something I certainly wouldn't want to mess with. Obviously, Andrew is taken out without much of a fight. Ben, Michelle, and Nicole all make it home, but can't find anyone because they're dead. Michelle gets a phone call and takes it in the garage, and you guessed it, now she's dead. It's like they were like, oops, we only have 5 minutes left in this horror movie. We better start killing people off. Now Ben and Nicole go around finding all these dead people, and seeing how they're their spouses, they get pretty upset. They do find a gun in Michelle's purse, however, and Ben decides that he's had enough of this. We, the audience, know that this is the work of the Rake. Ashley's been in the woods the whole time. However, Ben doesn't know that. He thinks that Ashley's doing all the killing to appease the Rake entity, just like Jacob from the beginning. So he locks Nicole in the bathroom to protect her and goes on the offense.
Ashley?
Eventually, Ashley does wander back to the house, and she sees the creature. She runs at it, trying to kill it, but then it turns out to be Ben, who shoots and kills her. In her last dying breath, she says, "It's in you, too." And it turns out that she meant this literally. Not like it's in your mind or it's something that you'll be obsessing about. No, the Rake is physically inside his body, and it's about to come out. After slitting his own throat, the creature crawls out of him, and it's nasty. For some reason, Nicole just sits there and watches all of this. Now's your time to run. You could be in the car halfway to the next town in the amount of time it takes for this thing to emerge. But she doesn't. She just stares at it. And then, that's the end. And that was The Rake. Probably a movie made to cash in on a popular internet horror story. And, I mean, good for them. It is a movie that certainly exists. However, I don't think The Rake is anyone's favorite movie of all time. Films like this are kind of the hallmark movies for horror fans. The plot's never too deep, the acting is good but not great, and the characters do some pretty dumb things. One thing I will give this movie credit for is the gore. It's ramped up to 11, and that's not always a good thing. Some people might like it, but I don't need to hear all the details of someone slitting their own throat, then hearing them bleed out. I get it, that's probably what it would be like, but that doesn't mean that I want to watch it. There's a fine line when there's just too much graphic detail, and this movie crossed it. I also have to mention how confusing it is at first. Once you find out Nicole is related to Ben and Ashley through adoption, it makes a little bit more sense, but still I was left scratching my head at times, wondering how all these people knew each other in the first place. The Rake is pretty cool looking, I'll give him that, but up until the end, I wasn't sure if it was even real, or just a mental condition, which I think was the point. I would pass on The Rake, unless you really got into the creepypasta and you want to see what one interpretation of the story could be. I give it 1.5 rakes out of 4.
Andrew, the guy who once drank an entire bottle of tequila and tried to fight a rugby team, now wears Mr. Rogers sweaters and drinks grape juice. Huh.